What's up, everybody? So Undisputed came out with an update to their blog, and they updated the fighter stats. And I want to let you guys know why the fighter stats that they explain are so important. Now, before we get into the specific fighter stats, you have to understand, when you're looking at the stats, we were usually just focused on the traits and focused on like the overall, like the power, the speed, or whatever, but I always wondered, what exactly does it mean? We need those nuts and bolts, because knowing those inner workings gives you a better idea about the fighter that you're using. So let's go ahead and get into it, and let's talk about it a little bit. You'll probably understand more what I'm saying as we go through it. So the first one that they have up was chin resistance. So chin resistance is used to determine the damage taken from power shots to the fighter's head, the threshold at which a fighter will enter dazed from a headshot, and a chance the fighter will continue to be dazed after getting up from a knockdown caused by a headshot. Now that last part, that tells me something, because I remember when I would get up, or my opponent would get up, and I'm like, oh snap, I still have adrenaline. So now if your opponent has low chin resistance, or if you know the fighter you're going against and they have low chin resistance, low body resistance, that's an area that you know to attack. And you know what results to expect. You know what I'm saying? Like, usually we didn't know why people were waking up and you still had adrenaline. I mean, getting up and still had adrenaline. I didn't know that. I was wondering why it happened sometimes, not all the time. I didn't understand how that worked. Now we know. And one thing that they should get fixed, I did put in a ticket for it, is if you still have adrenaline when you get up, or when your opponent gets up, you should be able to run over to them. Right now you can't. I haven't tested it since the most recent update, but that is something that I had mentioned, and aimbot had said, oh, put in a ticket for it because you should be able to do it. So we should be able to do that, and expect them to get that fixed in the future. Body resistance, kind of the same thing as chin resistance. And then you got your cut resistance. Cut resistance impacts the chance that the fighter will get cut from a punch, and impacts how quickly a cut will worsen. Bruise resistance impacts the chance that the fighter will get a bruise, and impacts how quickly a bruise will worsen. You have guarding, impacts the amount of damage a punch does to the fighter's block health. Those all seem standard and they make complete sense. When you look at heart, it says courage impacts the get up minigame difficulty for the fighter if they're knocked down. That's huge, especially for PvP. So now you know to look at that stat. Determines the amount. I'm going to block health, because courage is also used to determine the chance an AI fighter gets up after knockdown. Block health determines the amount of health the fighter's block has. Once a fighter's block is out of health, it becomes easier to punch through their block. And block regen impacts the rate at which your block health generates. That's all self-explanatory as well. Block regen, block health, but it's the courage part that you understand from a PvP perspective as well as an AI perspective. And so now when we start looking at speed, and you see agility, determines how far in each direction the fighter is able to weave. Didn't know that. Impacts the amount of time a fighter's counter window, the time in which their opponent can land a counter punch, is open. That's important. Determines how quickly a boxer is able to recover and throw another punch after missing a punch. So agility is huge. We needed this information. Move speed controls the speed at which a fighter is able to move around the ring. Punch speed impacts the speed at which a fighter's punches are thrown. But that agility, knowing that information, is big, especially when you're talking about creative player or creative fighter. When you look at accuracy, impacts a fighter's stability, a fighter's ability to adjust their punch to their opponent's movement, i.e. punch tracking. Okay, stamina determines the initial max stamina value of the fighter. Stamina regen determines the amount of stamina the fighter can regenerate per second when stamina regeneration is active. Stamina recovery determines the amount of stamina a fighter can recover between rounds. Now, there's nothing profound here in stamina. I think for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. And we can move on to conditioning, which is still part of stamina. Secondary stat that impacts a fighter's stamina recover, block health, and health recovery. Endurance impacts the amount of stamina a fighter loses per punch thrown. and we figured all of those. I didn't know conditioning was a secondary stat. So for strength, we got left hand power and right hand power. Of course, that's self-explanatory. You have the power punch modifier, impacts the amount of additional damage a fighter's power modified punch will do compared to their non-power punch. Jab modifier impacts how much damage a fighter's jab will do, and the hook modifier and uppercut modifier, those pretty much do the same things. It's just letting you know how much damage a fighter will do with the jab, hook, uppercut. But these were all important to know. Every last one of these is important to know, even if it is kind of straightforward, like the straight modifier and the counter punch modifier. Yeah, we understand it's exactly what it says, but it's still good to know. So vitality, head health determines the amount of head health. Yep, body health determines the amount of body health at the start of a fight. Health overall determines the boxer's overall health level when they go into dazed. Health regen determines the amount all health types can regenerate health per second. So that health regen is important too, y'all. Health recovery determines the amount of health a fighter can recover between rounds. Man, the agility, the stamina, the health and health regen, the conditioning, knowing that conditioning is pretty much a secondary stat. It's like a booster to all the rest of your stamina stats, like stamina regen and stamina recovery and stamina. Knowing that the courage impacts the get up minigame difficulty, as well as determining the AI's chances of getting up after a knockdown. And knowing about the body resistance and the chin resistance, and understanding that it's used to determine the chance of a fighter being dazed after they rise from a knockdown. This was all important stuff that we really needed to know. And I don't know, I like that it's in the blog, but I also wish it was embedded in the game somewhere so people can know, because we're not going to remember all of this. I know I'm not. And some of it is, like I said when I was talking through it, self-explanatory, but some of it's not. And these hidden gems, like with agility, as well as chin and body resistance, that's good for fighters to know. And it's good when you do your creative fighter. But that's all I have for this one. I just wanted to go over their blog note that they came out with today. Hope y'all have a good one. Until next time, peace.